jolly, fa la 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 la. 'Tis the season to be jolly, fa la 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 la. Don we now our gay apparel, fa la 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 la. Troll the ancient Yuletide carol, fa la 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 la. See the blazing Yule before us, fa la 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 la. Strike the harp and join the chorus, fa la 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 la. Join me now in merry measure, fa la 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 la. While I tell of Yuletide treasure, fa la 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 la. My Gavan and Melanin, welcome to my channel. It's been a while, I've taken some time, and now it is time to have a celebration of the Winter Solstice and a true Elven holiday known as Turuhalmë, or Turuhalmë. In Elvish, you always want to roll your R's, so try your hardest to roll that R. Valima Turuhalmë is what the elves would say to each other on this special day, December 21st. How do we know that? How do we actually know that this is a true Elvish holiday? Is because Tolkien wrote about it in his books, and it entered into a place called the Book of Lost Tales. So it was more of a draft that didn't get really put into his stories, but this is something that he created in his Middle-earth world. So I will read you all that, and you will see what the elves did and what we are going to do tonight. So thank you so much for joining in and celebrating with me. I really enjoy the holidays, and I celebrate both Yuletide as well as Christmas, and I will tell you why. Let me blow that out. So in the Book of Lost Tales, we learn that Tolkien really wanted to, he wanted to show how the elves really celebrated this special night of the winter solstice. And this is what it says. The rejected draft text of The Hiding of Valinor continues a little way beyond the end of Vair's tale, thus. Now after the telling of this tale, no more was there of speaking for that night. But Lindo begged Elios to consent to a tale telling of ceremony to be held the next night, or as soon as might be. But Elios would not agree, pleading matters that he must needs journey to a distant village to settle. So was it that the tale-telling was fixed ere the candles of sleep were lit for a 7 night from that time. And that was the day of Turuhalmë, or the log drawing day. That's what actually the word Turuhalmë means. 'Twill be a fitting day, said Lindo, for the sports of the morning in the snow, and the gathering of the logs from the woods, and the songs and drinking of Turuhalmë will leave us of right mood to listen to old tales beside this fire. So there you have it. Now, one of the things that we are probably getting to understand is that Christmas itself actually originated from this pagan tradition that started in the Scandinavian countries, who were the ones to realize it in Norway when the sun was basically at its longest time and available to them. And this represented the sun coming back to the earth after the winter and going through the fall and into the winter. And that every day from now on, the sun would be up a little bit more. And that would tell the coming of spring, so that the harvest and abundance of next year could be celebrated. So winter solstice is celebrated by pagans today, and Tolkien wrote that his elves celebrated this day as well. This is a day of appreciation for all that you have gone through throughout the year. It is a day of reflection and celebration with friends. You may exchange gifts, as the elves did, and tell tale telling and singing and merriment and feast. And that's what would happen on this type of day for the elves in Rivendell or wherever they would celebrate in their elven realms. So I created a Yule log myself today, and I just got a piece of wood, and you could get yours. You can actually make yours yourself, but I was not able to drill my own holes. So I found this piece of wood, and I was able to put some tea lights in it, and then just decorate it the way that you feel you want to. I just put some silver and gold pine cones together, and this is my Yule log that I make every year. And it's just a really nice way of having a centerpiece for your table or just around your home during this time. And I'm going to read from a great website, a pagan website that talks a little bit more about what Yule means. And I thought that this was really well written, so I wanted to read it to you all. The date of the Sabbath varies from December 20th to December 23rd, depending on the year in the Gregorian calendar. The winter solstice is celebrated at this time in the northern hemisphere. And so Yule is when the dark half of the year relinquishes to the light half. Starting the next morning at sunrise, the sun climbs just a little higher and stays a little longer in the sky each day, known as solstice night, or the longest night of the year. The sun's rebirth was celebrated with much joy. On this night, our ancestors celebrated the rebirth of the Oak King, the Sun King, the giver of life that warmed the frozen earth. And from this day forward, the days would become longer. Then you see how Christianity started to connect the dots with their thoughts about Jesus returning back to the earth. It is the sun returning back to the earth. And so Tolkien was a type of person that could actually see it all connecting together. And you're going to hear about that in his letters from Father Christmas, which he would write every year to his children. And that is what we are going to be doing today, is celebrating a little bit of Tolkien's letters and reading. I don't have a fireplace, but it's tale telling and telling the story of Tolkien and how he saw Christmas. But I will keep on going here because this is very interesting. Bonfires were lit in the fields, and crops and trees were wassailed with toast of spice cider. And wassailed, or however you want to pronounce it, but I think it rhymes with wassailing, is a type of singing that you go door to door of your neighbors and you have spice cider in your hands. So a lot of the carolers that go around singing through Christmas time is pretty much from this tradition. Children were escorted from house to house with gifts of clove, spiked apples, and oranges, which were laid in baskets of evergreen boughs and wheat stalks dusted with flour. The apples and oranges represented the sun. The boughs were symbolic of immortality. Evergreens were sacred to the Celts because they did not die, thereby representing the eternal aspect of the divine. The wheat stalks portrayed the harvest, and the flower was accomplishment of triumph, light, and life. Holly and ivy not only decorated the outside, but also the inside of homes, in hopes nature sprites would come and join the celebration. A sprig of holly was kept near the door all year long as a constant invitation for good fortune to visit the residence. Mistletoe was also hung as decoration. It represented the seed of the divine, and at midwinter, the druids would travel deep into the forest to harvest it. The ceremonial Yule log was the highlight of the solstice festival. In accordance to the tradition, the log must either have been harvested from the householder's land or given as a gift. It must never have been bought. Whoops. It's hard to find a Yule log in the city. It must never have been bought, and once dragged into the house and placed in the fireplace, it was decorated in seasonal greenery, doused with cider or ale, and dusted with flour before set ablaze by a piece of last year's log. Held onto for just this purpose, the log would burn throughout the night, then smolder for 12 days before being ceremonially put out. Ash is the traditional wood of the Yule log. It is a sacred world tree of the Teutons known as Yggdrasil, as herb of the sun. Ash brings light into the hearth at the solstice. Any different type of Yule log, and perhaps one more suitable for modern practitioners, would be the type that is used as a base to hold 3 candles. So this is my modern version here. It's a little bit safer and I don't have a fireplace, so this really just kind of sits on my table and just decorates my home during this time. So you can read more about Yule. There's so many wonderful websites that can help you celebrate this day, but this is what the elves did. And they would have log drawing, actually, where they would decorate a log in this way, and they would put 3 candles, and they would tell stories together and sing and celebrate around this log in the Hall of Fire of Rivendell. That's what I imagine. And I wanted to read some stories from this book, J.R.R. Tolkien, Letters from Father Christmas. If you don't have this book, I highly recommend it. If you love Tolkien and you really just love his spirit and you want to know more about his life, it is a true joy to be able to read the letters that he wrote to his children. I will tell you right now, when you read this book, you will understand how Tolkien is a lot of times typed as an INFP. He is so imaginative. He creates this whole other world on the side of actually writing his books, Lord of the Rings, because he wrote these letters during that time. He was able to create this whole other world that took place in the North Pole for his children to enjoy adventures of Father Christmas every year. It is just so touching. It's wonderful to read. I'm going to read you the letters that I feel are the most important. I did mark off a lot. I know some of you won't be able to stay because you have other things going on, but if you do, I really appreciate it because I picked them all for a very special reason. I'm going to read the intro for you. To the children of J.R.R. Tolkien, the interest and importance of Father Christmas extended beyond his filling of their stockings on Christmas Eve. For he wrote a letter to them every year in which he described in words and pictures his house, his friends, and the events, hilarious or alarming, at the North Pole. The first of the letters came in 1920, when John the eldest was 3 years old. And for over 20 years, through the childhoods of the 3 other children, Michael, Christopher, and Priscilla, they continued to arrive each Christmas. Sometimes the envelopes, dusted with snow and bearing polar postage stamps, were found in the house on the morning after his visit. Sometimes the postman brought them, and the letters that the children wrote themselves vanished from the fireplace when no one was about. As time went on, Father Christmas's household became larger, and whereas at first little is heard of anyone else except the North Polar Bear, later on there appear snow elves, red gnomes, snowmen, cave bears, and the polar bear's nephews, Paxu and Valakuta, who came on a visit and never went away. But the polar bear remained Father Christmas's chief assistant, and the chief cause of the disasters that led to muddles and deficiencies in the Christmas stockings, and sometimes he wrote on the letters his comments in angular capitals. Eventually, Father Christmas took on as his secretary an elf named Ilberith, very similar to Elberith, like the other name for Varda. And that's the thing is, what's interesting is you're going to start to see the connections between the Lord of the Rings and his Middle-earth world. He probably couldn't help mixing the two together because Middle-earth was so dear to his heart. And in the latter letters, elves play an important part in the defense of Father Christmas's house and store cellars against attacks by goblins. In this book are presented numerous examples of Father Christmas, shaky handwriting, and almost all the pictures that he sent are here reproduced. Also included in the alphabet that the polar bear devised from the goblin drawings on the walls of the caves where he was lost, and the letter that he sent to the children written in it. These pictures are absolutely beautiful. Tolkien was a painter, and I just saw all of his artwork as being very charming. And, he painted in each of the letters a little bit of like a drawing for the kids to see, basically Father Christmas's world and what was happening at the North Pole. All right, so let's begin. So this is when Tolkien was 28 years old, and this was in 1920. Dear John, I heard you ask Daddy what I was like and where I lived. I have drawn me and my house for you. Take care of the picture. I am just off now for Oxford with my bundle of toys, some for you. Hope I shall arrive in time. The snow is very thick at the North Pole tonight. Your loving Father Christmas. So this is where we start to see Tolkien decide, well, my children are asking me about Christmas and Santa Claus and all of that, so I'm gonna pretend I'm Father Christmas and basically tell them in a story form. He was the ultimate storyteller, as many of you know who love Lord of the Rings, and it was part of his personality and his identity and who he was. So he then decided to write all these letters to his children. And it's funny because he disguises his handwriting, and the book shows you basically, what the letters look like too. So it's just a great book. Anybody who loves Tolkien, you definitely should add it to your list of books to read. In 1923, so his age 31 at this time, my dear John, it is very cold today and my hand is very shaky. I am 7 years old on Christmas Day. Lots older than your great-grandfather, so I can't stop the pen wobbling, but I hear that you are getting so good at reading that I expect you will be able to read my letter. I send you lots of love and lots for Michael too, and lots bricks too, which are called that because there are lots more for you to have next year if you let me know in good time. I think they are prettier and stronger and tidier than pick-a-bricks, so I hope you will like them. Now I must go. It is a lovely fine night, and I have got hundreds of miles to go before morning. There's such a lot to do. A cold kiss from Father Nicholas Christmas. So there you start to see Tolkien's character of Father Christmas was a mix of, was basically Saint Nicholas. And because he was a Christian, he was including Saint Nick into this celebration of his family. But do you also see that he also very much adds a pagan element to it as well? And there's this wonderful article about how Tolkien was a pagan or a friend of the pagan, that it could be argued that he also had some pagan tendencies, because he was a Christian, but he was also so open to these pagan traditions and also knew a lot about the Green Man and Father Christmas's brother, who he calls his green brother. But I'll keep on going. So in 1925, he was age 33. My dear boys, I am dreadfully busy this year. It makes my hand more shaky than ever when I think of it, and not very rich. In fact, awful things have been happening, and some of the presents have gone spoiled, and I haven't got the North Polar Bear to help me, and I have had to move house just before Christmas, so you can imagine what a state everything is in, and you will see why I have a new address, and why I can only write one letter between you both. It all happened like this. One very windy day last November, my hood blew off and went and stuck on the top of the North Pole. I told him not to go, but the North Polar Bear climbed up to the thin top to get it down, and he did. The pole broke in the middle and fell on the roof of my house, and the North Polar Bear fell through the hole it made into the dining room with my hood over his nose. And all the snow fell off the roof onto the house and melted and put out all the fires and ran down into the cellars where I was collecting this year's presents, and the North Polar Bear's leg got broken. He is well again now, but I was so cross with him that he says he won't try to help me again. I expect his temper is hurt and will be mended by next Christmas. I send you a picture of the accident and my new house on the cliffs above the North Pole, with beautiful cellars in the cliffs. If John can't read my old shaking handwriting, 1,925 years old, he must get his father to. When is Michael going to learn to read and write his own letters to me? Lots of love to you both and Christopher, whose name is rather like mine. That's all. Goodbye, Father Christmas. And then at the end, you have Polar Bear kind of write his little bit. He says, P.S. Father Christmas was in a great hurry, told me to put in one of his magic wishing crackers. As you pull, wish, and see if it doesn't come true. Excuse the thick writing, I have a fat paw. I help Father Christmas with his packaging. I live with him. I am the great polar bear. And then here's the beautiful picture, if you could see. Yeah, I mean, his paintings are so detailed. If you Google some of the images from the book, you might be able to see them a little bit better. But if you love his art, then I highly suggest you grabbing this book. It was like $11 on Amazon. A wonderful deal for me. So in 1926, age 34, this is where we start to see his love for fireworks. Tolkien had fireworks going off in Lord of the Rings, and he had also in the North Pole for Father Christmas. So we had Gandalf for Lord of the Rings, who was known for his fireworks, and then Father Christmas was also known for his fireworks too. My dear boys, I am more shaky than usual this year. The North Polar Bear's fault. It was the biggest bang in the world and the most monstrous firework there ever has been. It turned the North Pole black and shook all the stars out of place, broke the moon into four, and the man in it fell into my back garden. He ate quite a lot of my Christmas chocolates before he said he felt better and climbed back to mend it and get the stars tidy. Then I found out that the reindeer had broken loose. They were running all over the country, breaking reins and ropes and tossing presents up in the air. They were all packed up to start, you see. Yes, it only happened this morning. It was a sleigh load of chocolate things, which I always send to England early. I hope yours are not badly damaged. But isn't the North Polar Bear silly? And he isn't a bit sorry. Of course he did it, you remember. I had to move last year because of him. The tap for turning on the Rory Borealis fireworks is still in the cellar of my old house. The North Polar Bear knew he must never touch it. I only let it off on special days, like Christmas. He says he thought it was cut off since we moved. Anyway, he was nosing around the ruins this morning soon after breakfast. He hides things to eat there and turns on all the northern lights for 2 years in one go. You have never heard or seen anything like it. I have tried to draw a picture of it, but I am too shaky to do it properly, and you can't paint fizzing light, can you? I think the polar bear has spoilt the picture rather. Of course, he can't draw with those great fat paws. Rude, I can, and write without shaking. By going and putting a bit of his own about me, chasing the reindeer and him laughing. He did laugh too, so did I, when I saw him trying to draw a reindeer and inking his nice white paws. When I change my voice, it's going to be the polar bear interjecting. So there's polar bear and Father Christmas writing on these letters. And then later on, an elf starts writing as his secretary. Father Christmas had to hurry away and leave me to finish. He is old and gets worried when funny things happen. You would have laughed too. I think it is good of me laughing. It was a lovely firework. The reindeer will run quick to England this year. They are still frightened. I must go and help pack. I don't know what Father Christmas would do without me. He always forgets with a lot of packing I do for him. The snowman is addressing our envelopes this year. He is Father Christmas's gardener. But we don't get much but snowdrops and frost ferns to grow here. He always writes in white, just with his finger. A Merry Christmas to you from the North Pole, and love from Father Christmas to you all. Look at this beautiful painting. Isn't that gorgeous? I would love to have one of his paintings in my home. It'd be wonderful. 1927, age 35, Tolkien is. This is when we start to see dragons. My dear people, there seem to get more and more of you every year. I get poorer and poorer. Still, I hope that I have managed to bring you all something you wanted, though not everything you asked for. Michael and Christopher, I haven't heard from John this year. I suppose he is growing too big and won't even hang up his stockings soon. It has been so bitter at the North Pole lately that the North Polar Bear has spent much of the time asleep and has been less use than usual this Christmas. Well, everybody does sleep most of the time here in winter, especially Father Christmas. Well, the North Pole became colder than any cold thing ever has been, and when the North Polar Bear put his nose against it, it took the skin off. Now it is bandaged with red flannel. Why did he? I don't know, but he is always putting his nose where it oughtn't to be, into my cupboards, for instance. Well, that's because I'm hungry. Also, it has been very dark here since winter began. We haven't seen the sun, of course, for 3 months, but there are no northern lights this year. You remember the awful accident last year? There will be none again until the end of 1928. The North Polar Bear has got his cousin and distant friend, the Great Bear, to shine extra bright for us, and this week I have hired a comet to do my packing by, but it doesn't work as well. The North Polar Bear has not really been any more sensible this year. I've been perfectly sensible and have learned to write with a pen in my mouth instead of paintbrush. Well, yesterday he was snowballing the snowman in the garden and pushed him over the edge of the cliff, so that he fell into my sleigh at the bottom and broke lots of things. One of them was his self. I used some of what was left of him to paint my white picture. We shall have to make ourselves a new gardener when we are less busy. The man in the moon paid me a visit the other day, a fortnight ago exactly. He often does about this time, as he gets lonely in the moon, and we make him a nice little plum pudding. He is so fond of things with plums in. I feel like a dwarf when I do that voice. It just comes naturally there. His fingers were cold as usual, and the North Polar Bear made him play snapdragons to warm them. Of course, he burnt them, and then he licked them, and then he licked the brandy, and then the bear gave him lots more, and he went fast asleep on the sofa. Then I went down into the cellars to make crackers, and he rolled off the sofa, and the wicked bear pushed him underneath and forgot all about him. He can never be away a whole night from the moon, but he was this time. I've never been expected to look after the man in the moon before. I was very nice to him, and he was very comfy under the sofa. Suddenly the snow moon, he wasn't broken then, rushed out into the garden next day, just after tea time, and said the moon was going out. The dragons had come out and were making an awful smoke and smother. We rolled him out and shook him, and he simply whizzed back, but it was ages before he got things quite cleared up. I believe he had to let loose one of his simply terrific, I'll just say, freezing magics before he could drive the dragons back into their holes, and that is why it has got so cold down here. The polar bear only laughs when I tell him it's his fault, and he curls up on my hearth rug, and won't do anything but snore. My messengers told me that you have somebody from Iceland staying with you. That is not so far from where I live, and nearly as cold. People don't hang up stockings there, and I usually pass by in a hurry, though I sometimes pop down and leave a thing or two for their very jolly Christmas trees. So this is interesting because we start to see that Tolkien had a friend from Iceland, and he doesn't go into it, but maybe this is why he was so open to kind of the Scandinavian or the Norway traditions of Yule. And so maybe that's why he had actually a friend from Iceland and they were staying with the family. My usual way is down through Norway, Denmark, Germany, Switzerland, and then back through Germany, northern France, Belgium, and so into England. And on the way home, I pass over the sea, and sometimes Iceland, and I can see the twinkling lights faint in the valleys under the mountains. But I go by quick. As my reindeer gallop as hard as they can, they always say they are frightened a volcano or a geyser will go off underneath them. This must be all. I have written you a very long letter this year, as there was nothing to draw but dark and snow and stars. Love to you all, and happiness next year. Your loving Father Christmas. And I'll show you, because he said he just painted in white, and he did. All right. So then I skip, because I'm only doing the letters that I think are most important. And that kind of give you more of an idea of how he started to form Middle-earth, and he was, everything just connected together. In 1929, so he was age 37. Now this is interesting because he starts to write with the Kyrth, which is the Elvish. It's the Elvish writing that looks like runes. It was the early alphabet of the elves. And you could see this on his letter. Oh, you see it there. So it's very, very similar to kind of the rune writing of the elves. A little bit different because he doesn't do everything, completely the same. He's not going to copy, but there's a similarity there. And here's what he says. Dear boys, my paw is... Oh, it's polar bear. Dear boys, my paw is better. I was cutting Christmas trees when I heard it. Don't you think my writing is much better too? Father Christmas is very busy already. So am I. We have had heavy snow and some of our messengers got buried and some lost. That is why you have not heard lately. And I thought it was so interesting that he's actually spelling things wrong to show how a bear is not educated, not literate. So he's spelling purposely wrong to create, but I mean, you could read it like Y is spelled W-H-I, and some lost is S-U-M, lost. That is why you have not heard lately. Love to John for his birthday. Father Christmas says, my English spelling is not good. I can't help it. We don't speak English here. Only Arctic, which you don't know. We always make our letters different. I have made mine like Arctic letters for you to see. We always write for T and V for you. This is some Arctic handwich, which means goodbye till I see you next, and I hope it will be soon. Mara mesta I ni vila ti ento ya rata nea. PB, my real name is Carew, but I don't tell most people. P.S. I like letters and think Christopher's are nice. So I wanted to just show you that letter where he was writing in runes. Very interesting. Age 37. So that was November 1929. So I think he wrote that letter because maybe that was a time when he was really focused on his Elvish alphabet, maybe. And then the Christmas letter came on Christmas morn, 1929, same year. Dear boys and girls, it is a light Christmas again. I am glad to say the northern lights have been specially good. There is a lot to tell you. You have heard that the great polar bear chopped his paw when he was cutting Christmas trees. His right one, I mean not his left, of course it was wrong to cut it, and I pity too, for he spent a lot of the summer learning to write better so as to help me with my winter letters. We had a bonfire this year to please the polar bear, to celebrate the coming in of winter. The snow elves let off all the rockets together, which surprised us both. I have tried to draw you a picture of it, but really there were hundreds of rockets. You can't see the elves at all against the snow background. The bonfire made a hole in the ice and woke up the great seal, who happened to be underneath. The polar bear let off 20,000 silver sparklers afterwards, used up all my stock, so that is why I have none to send you. Then he went for a holiday to North Norway and stayed with a woodcutter called Olaf. Spelled exactly the same like the Frozen movie Olaf, and came back with paw all bandaged just as at the beginning of our busy times. There seem more children than ever in England, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Germany, which are the countries I specially look after, and of course North America and Canada, not to speak of getting stuff down to the South Pole for children who expect to be looked after, though they have gone to live in New Zealand or Australia or South Africa or China. It is a good thing clocks don't tell the same time all over the world, or I should never get around. Although when my magic is strongest, at Christmas, I can do about 1,000 stockings a minute. If I have it all planned out beforehand, you could hardly guess the enormous piles of lists I make out. I seldom get them mixed, but I am rather worried this year. In my office and packing room, the polar bear reads out names while I copy them down. We had awful gales here, worse than you did, tearing clouds of snow to a million tatters, screaming like demons, burying my house almost up to the roofs. Just at the worst, the polar bear said it was stuffy and opened a north window before I could stop him. You can guess the result. The north polar bear was buried in papers and lists, but that did not stop him laughing. Also, all my red and green ink was upset, as well as black, so I'm writing in chalk and pencil. I have some black ink left, and the polar bear is using it to address parcels. I liked all your letters, very much indeed, my dears. Nobody or very few write so much or so nicely to me. I'm especially pleased with Christopher's card and his letters and with his learning to write. So I am sending him a fountain pen. Also, a special picture for himself. It shows me crossing the sea on the upper north wind, while a southwest gale, reindeer hate it, is raising big waves below. While a southwest gale, reindeer hate it, is raising big waves below. This must be all now. I send you all my love. One more stocking to fill this year. I hope you will like your new house and the things I bring. Your old Father Christmas. Oh, so the Tolkiens moved that year. And here is a lovely painting, or it's not even a painting. I think it's a pastel. That's what he said. So like oil pastels, I think he used here. He was an artist. He really was. Isn't that cool? Oh, sorry, so the glare. Well, buy the book if you really want to see his artwork. It's amazing. And here's the letter. It's like, I don't even know how the boys read that. He's really trying to disguise his own handwriting. It's funny. So I'm just going to read this part. December 6th is St. Nicholas Day in the Western Christian countries. And the 19th of December in the Eastern Christian countries. So the 19th of December is the first day of Nicholas of Myra, which is Nicholas, the Saint Nicholas of Bari during the Roman Empire. And he was said to be a man that did a lot of different types of amazing things. There was a story of him saving 3 girls from a life of prostitution by actually dropping money through a window of those that were taking the girls, so that I guess maybe he was trying to give it to the father that was going to sell them off, maybe. So you could read more about what Saint Nicholas is said to do and why he became canonized as a saint. But this is what Tolkien writes about here. Well, my dears, there is lots more I should like to say about my green brother and my father, old grandfather Yule, and why we were both called Nicholas after the saint, whose day is December 6th, who used to give secret presents, sometimes throwing purses of money through the window. But I must hurry away. I am late already, and I am afraid you may not get this in time. Kisses to you all. Father Nicholas Christmas. So then this is where you start to see he is including his children into seeing all the ways that you can understand Christmas time, that he says he has a green brother, that Father Christmas has a green brother that is very much like the green man, or kind of the pagan god that, like, even Odin or Woden, he's also called, in the times when they would worship that pagan god, and it was the Yule time. It was about rejoicing and celebrating nature. So Tolkien was very aware of that Father Christmas would be related somehow to this pagan god, which is his green brother, and old grandfather Yule, who he kind of made as well, who could probably be actually Odin himself. So he doesn't really go into it too much, but I thought that was just really interesting that he added that in. And then when we go to 1931, he's at age 39, and he says this: "My dear children, I hope you will like the little things I have sent you. You seem to be most interested in railways just now, so I am sending you mostly things of that sort. I send as much love as ever, in fact, more. We have both, the old polar bear and I, enjoyed having so many nice letters from you and your pets. If you think we have not read them, you are wrong. But if you find that not many of the things you asked for have come, and not perhaps quite as many as sometimes, remember that this Christmas, all over the world, there are a terrible number of poor and starving people. I, and also my green brother, have had to do some collecting of food and clothes and toys too, for the children whose fathers and mothers and friends cannot give them anything, sometimes not even dinner. I know yours won't forget you. So, my dears, I hope you will be happy this Christmas and not quarrel, and we'll have some good games with your railway altogether. Don't forget old Father Christmas when you light your tree." I just thought that was so wonderful. Maybe his children were wanting a lot, and it seemed that Tolkien was really trying to teach, his children that it's best to, appreciate what you have, and that others are going without, with even food. And so I thought that was really beautiful to kind of add that in a touching way, like a teachable life lesson for them. And that's just the type of man that Tolkien was. He was I think he was able to create his elves and his wizards with having the type of characters that they had, because he himself had that wisdom. He was a very spiritually, I would say, enlightened man, and that he would recognize the needs of others, and he was able to teach that to his children. And I just think that that's a really great example of who Tolkien really was. Age 40. My dear children, there is a lot to tell you. First of all, a Merry Christmas. But there have been lots of adventures you will want to hear about. It all began with the funny noises underground, which started in the summer and got worse and worse. I was afraid an earthquake might happen. The North Polar Bear says he suspected what was wrong from the beginning. I only wish he had said something to me, and anyway, it can't be quite true, as he was fast asleep when it began and did not wake up till about Michael's birthday. However, he went off for a walk one day, at the end of November, I think, and never came back. About a fortnight ago, I began to be really worried, for after all, the dear old thing is really a lot of help in spite of accidents, and very amusing. On Friday, December 9th, there was a bumping at the front door, and a snuffling, and I thought he had come back and lost his key, as often before. But when I opened the door, there was another very old bear there, a very fat and funny-shaped one. Actually, was the eldest of the few remaining cave bears, old Mr. Cave Bear himself. I had not seen him for centuries. "Do you want your North Polar Bear?" he said. "If you do, you had better come and get him." It turned out he was lost in the caves, belonging to Mr. Cave Bear, or so he says, not far from the ruins of my old house. He says he found a hole in the side of a hill and went inside because it was snowing. He slipped down a long slope, and lots of rock fell after him, and he found he could not climb up or get out again. But almost at once he smelt goblin and became interested and started to explore. Not very wise, for of course goblins can't hurt him, but their caves are very dangerous. Naturally, he soon got lost, and the goblin shut off all the lights and made queer noises and false echoes. Goblins are to us very much what rats are to you, only worse, because they are clever, and only better because there are, in these parts, very few. We thought there were none left. Long ago we had a great trouble with them, and that was about 1453, I believe, but we got the help of the gnomes, who are their greatest enemies, and cleared them out. Anyway, there was poor old Polar Bear lost in the dark all among them, and all alone until he met Mr. Cave Bear, who lives there. Cave Bear can see pretty well into the dark, and he offered to take Polar Bear to his private back door. So they set off together, but the goblins were very excited and angry. Polar Bear had boxed one or two flat that came and poked him in the dark, and had said some very nasty things to them all, and they enticed him away by imitating Cave Bear's voice, which of course they know very well. So Polar Bear got into a frightful dark part, all full of different passages, and he lost Cave Bear, and Cave Bear lost him. Light is what we need, said Cave Bear to me, so I got some of my special sparkling torches, which I sometimes use in my deepest cellars, and we set off that night. The caves are wonderful, I knew they were there, but not how many or how big they were. Of course, the goblins went off into the deepest holes and corners, and we soon found Polar Bear. He was getting quite long and thin with hunger, as he had been in the caves about a fortnight. He said I should soon have been able to squeeze through a goblin crack. Polar Bear himself was astonished when I brought light, for the most remarkable thing is that the walls of these caves are all covered with pictures cut into the rock or painted on in red and brown and black. Some of them are very good, mostly of animals, and some are queer and some bad, and there are many strange marks, signs, and scribbles, some of which have a nasty look, and I am sure have something to do with black magic. Cave Bear says these caves belong to him, and have belonged to him or his family since the days of his great-great-grandfather. Great, multiplied by 10 grandfather. And the bears first had the idea of decorating the walls and used to scratch pictures on them on soft parts. It was useful for sharpening the claws. Then men came along. Imagine it. Cave Bear says there were lots about at one time, long ago, when the North Pole was somewhere else. That was long before my time, and I have never heard old grandfather Yule mention it even. So I don't know if he is talking nonsense or not. Many of the pictures were done by these cavemen, the best ones, especially the big ones, almost life-size, of animals, some of which have since disappeared. There are dragons and quite a lot of mammoths. Men also put some of the black marks and pictures there, but the goblins had scribbled all over the place. They can't draw well, and anyway, they like nasty queer shapes best. North Polar Bear got quite excited when he saw all these things. He said, "These cave people could draw better than you, Daddy Noel, and wouldn't your young friends just like to see some really good pictures, especially some properly drawn bears for a change?" Rather rude, I thought, if only a joke, as I take a lot of trouble over my Christmas pictures. Some of them take quite a minute to do, and though I only send them to special friends, I have a good many in different places. So just to show him and to please you, I have copied a whole page from the wall of the chief central cave, and I send you a copy. It is not perhaps quite as well drawn as the originals, which are very, very much larger, except the goblin parts, which are easy. They are the only parts of the polar bear can do very well. He says he likes them best, but that is only because he can copy them. The goblin pictures must be very old, because the goblin fighters are sitting on dress seals, a very queer sort of dwarf dachshund horse character or creature they used to use, but they have died out long before. I believe the red gnomes finished them off somewhere about Edward IV's time. The animal drawings are magnificent. The hairy rhinoceros looks wicked. There's also a nasty look in the mammoth's eyes. Also the ox, stag, boar, and cave bear, portrait of Mr. Cave Bear's 21st ancestor, he says, and some other kind of polarish, but not quite polar bear. North Polar Bear would like to believe it is a portrait of one of his ancestors. Just under the bears is the best a goblin can do at drawing reindeer. You have been so good in writing to me, and such beautiful letters too, that I have tried to draw you some specially nice pictures this year. At the top of my Christmas card is a picture, imaginary but more or less as it really is, of me arriving over Oxford. Your house is just about where the 3 little black points stick up at the shadows of the right, and I am coming from north and note, not with 12 pair of deer, as you will see in some books. I usually use 7 pair. 14 is such a nice number, and at Christmas especially if I am hurried. I add my 2 special white ones in front. He really loves the number 7. I mean, 14 is the amount of Valar that he created in the Silmarillion, and 7 female and 7 male Valar. And I will say this. Next comes a picture of me and Cave Bear and North Polar Bear exploring the caves. I will tell you more about that in a minute. The last picture hasn't happened yet. It soon will on St. Stephen's Day, when all the rush is over. I am going to have a rowdy party. The Cave Bear's grandchildren, they are exactly like teddy bears, snow babies, some children of the red gnomes, and of course polar bears, including Paxu and Valatuka, will be there. I'm wearing a pair of new green trousers. They were a present from my green brother, but I only wear them at home. Goblins, anyway, dislike green, so I found them useful. So I will just show you these pictures here. Oh, this is like so gorgeous. So this is the cave, and it's really interesting. It's got like cave drawings everywhere, and then you have, you know, Father Christmas with the polar bear, and then this is the cave drawings that he was talking about, and the ones in red are the goblins, or the goblins drawings, I guess, or they added like little shapes like circles and squares. So the goblins added all the red that you see, or they colored it in, I guess. Very interesting. This one is, you see, when I rescued Polar Bear, we hadn't finished the adventures. At the beginning of last week, we went into the cellars to get up the stuff for England. I said to Polar Bear, somebody has been disarranging things here. Paxu and Valatuka, I expect, he said, but it wasn't. Next day, things were much worse, especially among the railway things, lots of which seemed to be missing. I ought to have guessed, and Polar Bear, anyway, ought to have mentioned his guess to me. Last Saturday, we went down and found nearly everything had disappeared out of the main cellar. Imagine my state of mind. Nothing hardly to send to anybody, and too little time to get or make enough new stuff. North Polar Bear said, I smell goblin strong. Of course, it was obvious. They love mechanical toys, though they quickly smash them and want more and more and more. And particularly all the Hornby things have gone. Especially we found a large hole, but not big enough for us, leading to a tunnel behind some packing cases in the west cellar. As you will expect, we rushed off to find Cave Bear, and we went back to the caves, and we soon understood the queer noises. It was plain the goblins long ago had burrowed a tunnel from the caves to my old home, which was not so far from the end of their hills, and had stolen a good many things. We found some things more than 100 years old, even a few parcels still addressed to your great grand people. But they had been very clever and not too greedy, and I had not found out. Ever since I moved, they must have been busy burrowing all the way to my cliff, boring and banging and blasting as quietly as they could. At last they had reached my new cellars, and the sight of the Hornby things was soon too much for them. They took all they could. I dare say they were also still angry with the polar bear. Also, they thought we couldn't get at them. But I sent my patent green luminous smoke down the tunnel, and polar bear blew and blew it with our enormous kitchen bellows. They simply shrieked and rushed out the other cave end. But there were red gnomes there. I had specially sent for them. A few of the real old families are still in Norway. They captured hundreds of goblins and chased many more out into the snow, which they hate. We made them show us where they had hidden things or bring them back again, and by Monday we had got particularly everything back. The gnomes are still dealing with the goblins, and promise there won't be one left by next New Year. By New Year. But I am not so sure they will crop up again in a century or so, I expect. We had a rush, but dear old Cave Bear and his sons and the gnome ladies helped, so that we are now very well forward and all packed. I hope there is not the faintest smell of goblin about any of your things. They have been well aired. There are still a few railway things missing, but I hope you will have what you want. I'm not able to carry quite as much toy cargo as usual this year, as I am taking a good deal of food and clothes, usual stuff. There are far too many people in your land, and others who are hungry and cold this winter. I am glad that with you the weather is warmish. It is not warm here. We've had tremendous icy winds and terrific snowstorms, and my old house is quite buried, but I'm feeling very well, better than ever, and though my hand wobbles with a pen, partly because I don't like writing as much as drawing, which I learnt first, I don't think it is so wobbly this year. And then he kind of continues. This is one of my very longest letters. It has been an exciting time. I hope you will like hearing about it. I send you all my love, John, Michael, Christopher, and Priscilla. Also, Mummy and Daddy and Auntie are all the people in your house. I dare say John will feel that he has got to give up stockings now and give way to the many new children that have arrived since he first began to hang this up. But Father Christmas will not forget him. Bless you all. Your loving Nicholas Christmas. So I wanted to read you that because that was when you could see the goblins and the whole idea of the orcs kind of underground, and that whole image of the goblins and the orcs and having these underground caves and taking over Moria where the dwarves once lived. I mean, this kind of follows that and goes right in. So this is where you start to see the elves come in. So I wanted to read you this here. So this is the big fight now, the battle. My dears, another Christmas. Oh, and this is 1933. So this is when he's age 41. Another Christmas, and I almost thought at one time in November that there would not be one this year. There would be the 25th of December. Of course, but nothing from your old great-grandfather at the North Pole. Goblins, the worst attack we have had for centuries. They have been fearfully wild and angry ever since we took all their stolen toys off them last year and doused them with green smoke. You remember the red gnomes promised to clear all of them out. There was not one to be found in any hole or cave by New Year's Day, but I said they would crop up again in a century or so. They have not waited so long. They must have gathered their nasty friends from mountains all over the world and been busy all the summer while we were at our sleepiest. This time we had very little warning. Soon after All Saints' Day, Polar Bear got very restless. He now says he smelt nasty smells, but as usual, he did not say anything. He says he did not want to trouble me. He really is a nice old thing, and this time he absolutely saved Christmas. He took to sleeping in the kitchen with his nose towards the cellar door, opening on the main stairway down to my big stores. One night, just about Christopher's birthday, I woke up suddenly. There was squeaking and spluttering in the room and a nasty smell in my own best green and purple room that I had just got done up beautifully. I caught sight of a wicked little face at the window. Then I really was upset, for my window was high above the cliff, and that meant there were bat-riding goblins about, which we haven't seen since the Goblin War in 1453. That I told you about. I was only just quite awake when a terrific din began far downstairs, in the store cellars. It would take too long to describe, so I had tried to draw a picture of what I saw when I got down after treading on a goblin on the mat. Only there was more like 1,000 goblins than 15. Polar Bear is coming in. But you could hardly expect me to draw 1,000. Polar Bear was squeezing and squashing and trampling and boxing and kicking goblins sky high and roaring like a zoo, and the goblins were yelling like engine whistles. He was splendid. Say no more. I enjoyed it immensely. Well, it is a long story. The trouble lasted for over a fortnight, and it began to look as if I should never be able to get my sleigh out this year. The goblins had set part of the stores on fire and captured several gnomes who sleep down there on guard, before Polar Bear and some more gnomes came in and killed 100 before I arrived. Even when we had put the fire out and cleared the cellars and house, I can't think what they were doing in my room unless they were trying to set fire to my bed. The trouble went on. The ground was black with goblins under the moon when we looked out, and they had broken my stables and gone off with the reindeer. I had to blow my golden trumpet, which I had not done for many years, to summon all my friends. There were several battles every night. They used to attack and set fire in the stores before we got the upper hand, and I am afraid quite a lot of my dear elves got hurt. Fortunately, we have not lost much except my best string, gold and silver, and packing papers and holly boxes, and I'm very short on these. And I've been very short on messengers. Lots of my people are still away. I hope they will come back safe, chasing the goblins out of my land, those that are left alive. They have rescued all my reindeer. We are quite happy and settled again now, and feel much safer. It really will be centuries before we get another goblin trouble. Thanks to Polar Bear and the gnomes, there can't be very many left at all. And Father Christmas, I wish I could draw or had time to try. You have no idea what the old man can do. Lightning and fireworks and thunder of guns. Polar Bear certainly has been busy helping in double help, but he has mixed up some of the girls' things with the boys in his hurry. We hope we have got it all sorted out. But if you hear of anyone getting a doll when they wanted an engine, you will know why. Actually, Polar Bear tells me I am wrong. We did lose a lot of railway stuff. Goblins always go for that. And what we got back was damaged and will have to be repainted. It will be a busy summer next year. Now, a Merry Christmas to you all once again. I hope you will all have a very happy time, and will find that I have taken notice of your letters and sent you what you wanted. I don't think my pictures are very good this year, though I took quite a lot of time over them. Polar Bear says, I don't see that a lot of stars and pictures of goblins in your bedroom are so frightfully merry. Still, I hope you won't mind. It is rather good of Polar Bear kicking, really. Anyway, I send lots of love. Yours ever, and annually, Father Nicholas Christmas. So this is really neat. You have like the little elves that were helping the polar bear defeat the goblins and the red gnomes. And then you have Father Christmas's bedroom. So that's when you start to see the elves take on that type of persona that, they're going to fight against the orcs and they're going to help drive the orcs away, part of that battle. So now I will say the Red Elves. In 1935, he writes, by age 43. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but here he says this. I have had to have a lot of Red Elves to help me. They are very nice and great fun, but although they are very quick, they don't get on fast, for they turn everything, picture, into a game, even digging snow, and they will play with the toys they are supposed to be packing. So then he started to introduce this other type of species of elves, which are the Red Elves, and they started to help him with the reindeer stables. So it's kind of like the Sami people, maybe, who were known as the reindeer herders of Norway. So he's saying that they loved to play with the toys so much that they weren't as good as packing. He's probably just saying that they're just jolly in spirit and love to play. So then he starts saying that I have given my elves some new magic sparkler spears that will scare the goblins out of their wits. It is now December 24th, and they have not appeared this year, and practically everything is packed up and ready. I shall be starting soon. I send you all, John, Michael, and Christopher, and Priscilla, my love and good wishes this Christmas. So that's when you start to see the elves, the other type of elves, the red elves. And then you have the normal elves, the regular elves, which is his helpers. And now we meet Ilbereth, the secretary, the elven secretary of Father Christmas. So in 1936, and this was age 44, Tolkien was. My dear children, I am sorry I cannot send you a long letter to thank you for yours, but I am sending you a picture which will explain a good deal. It is a good thing your changed lists arrived before these awful events, or I could not have done anything about it. I do hope you will like what I'm bringing and will forgive any mistakes, and I hope nothing will be wet. I am still so shaky and upset. I'm getting one of my elves to write a bit more about things. I send you very much love to all. And now, this is so cute. So then he starts writing in like a fancy script, like the Elven Tengwar, which is the Elvish script that you see on the ring of power. And so he writes this. Father Christmas says you will want to hear some news. Polar Bear has been quite good, or had been, though he has been rather tired. So has Father Christmas. I think the Christmas business is getting rather too much for them. So a lot of us red and green elves have gone to live permanently at Cliff House and be trained in the packing business. It was Polar Bear's idea. He also invented the number system so that every child that Father Christmas deals with has a number, and we elves learn them all by heart, and all the addresses. That saves a lot of writing. So many children have had the same name that every packet used to have the address as well. Polar Bear said, I am going to have a record year and help Father Christmas to get so forward we can have some fun ourselves on Christmas Day. We all worked hard, and you will be surprised to hear that every single parcel was packed and numbered by Saturday, December 19th. Then Polar Bear said, I am tired out. I am going to have a hot bath and go to bed early. Well, you can guess what happened. Father Christmas was taking a last look round in the English delivery room about 10 o'clock when water poured through the ceiling and swamped everything. It was soon 6 inches deep on the floor. Polar Bear had simply got into the bath with both taps running and gone fast asleep with one hind paw on the overflow. He had been asleep 2 hours when we woke him. Father Christmas was really angry, but Polar Bear only said, I did have a jolly dream. I dreamt I was diving off a melting iceberg and chasing seals. He said later when he saw the damage, well, there is one thing, those children at North Pole Road, Oxford, he always says that, may lose some of their presents, but they will have a letter worth hearing this year. They can see a joke, even if none of you can. That made Father Christmas angrier, and Polar Bear said, well, draw a picture of it and ask them if it's funny or not. So Father Christmas has, but he has begun to think it is funny, although very annoying, himself now. We have cleared up the mess and got the English presents repacked again, just in time. We are all rather tired, so please excuse scrawly writing. Yours, Ilbereth, Secretary to Father Christmas. So there you see, and then there is, he starts to include this interesting goblin language. So this is like goblin alphabet, it's called, which is just like little figures. And then you have the Kyrth, which is like the Elvish runes of the Elven alphabet. And age 45. Ilbereth writes again. Actually, this is not Ilbereth. This is... Oh. So here it is in... Oh. Sorry about that. Oh, this is cute. So this one is 1937. He writes this letter to the children, and then he has Ilbereth come in, and I'll read the elves part since I'm an elf. I will read you the elves part here. Dear children, I am Ilbereth. I have written to you before. I am finishing your father's Christmas. Shall I tell you about my pictures? Polar Bear and Velatuka and Paxu are always lazy after Christmas, or rather after the St. Stephen's Day parade. Father Christmas is ringing for breakfast in vain. Another day with Polar Bear, as usual, was late. Not true. And then Polar Bear kind of pipes into Ilbereth's letter. And it's really cute, the relationship between the elf and the bear. It's kind of like a relationship between the elves and the dwarves, actually. And then this is his little picture or painting. And he's so nicely organized, neat. So he displays the whole events going on. And that's Ilbereth's painting. Paxu threw a bath sponge full of icy water on his face. Polar Bear chased him all around the house and round the garden and then forgave him because he had not caught Paxu, but he had found a huge appetite. We have had terrible weather at the end of winter and actually had rain. We could not go out for days. I've drawn Polar Bear and his nephews when they did venture out. Paxu and Velatuka had never gone away. They like it so much that they have begged to stay. It was much too warm at the North Pole this year. A large lake formed at the bottom of the cliff and left the North Pole standing on an island. I have drawn a view looking south, so the cliff is on the other side. It was about midsummer. The North Polar Bear, his nephews, and lots of polar cubs used to come and bathe, also seals. North Polar Bears took to trying a paddle boat or canoe, but he fell in so often that the seals thought he liked it, and used to get under the boat and tip it up, and that made him annoyed. The sport did not last long, as the water froze again early in August. Then we began to think of this Christmas. In my picture, Father Christmas is dividing up the lists and giving me my special list. You are in it. North Polar Bear, of course, always pretends to be managing everything, and that's why he is pointing. But I am really listening to Father Christmas, and I am saluting him, not North Polar Bear. And then the bear pipes in and goes, rude little errand boy. And then the elf continues to ignore him. We had a glorious bonfire and fireworks to celebrate the coming of winter and the beginning of real preparations. The snow came down very thick in November, and the elves and snow boys had several tobogganing half-holidays. The polar cubs were not so good at it. They fell off, and most of them took to rolling or sliding down just by themselves. And today, but this is the best bit, I had just finished my picture, or I might have drawn it differently. Okay, so then he kind of goes on and says, Polar Bear was being allowed to decorate a big tree in the garden, all by himself, and a ladder. Suddenly, are heard terribly growing squealing noises. We rushed out to find Polar Bear hanging on the tree himself. You are not a decoration, said Father Christmas. Anyway, I am all right, he shouted. He was, and we threw a bucket of water over him, which spoilt a lot of decorations, but saved his fur. The silly old thing has rested the ladder against a branch instead of the trunk of the tree. Then he thought, I will just light the candles to see if they are working, although he was told not to. So he climbed to the top of the ladder with a taper, and just then the branch cracked and the ladder slipped off on the snow, and Polar Bear fell into the tree and caught on some wire, and his fur got caught on fire. Luckily, it was rather damp, or he might have fizzled. I wonder if roast polar bear is good to eat. The last picture is imaginary and was not very good, but I hope it will come true. It will if polar bear behaves. I hope you can read my writing. I try to write like dear old Father Christmas, without the trembles, but I cannot do so well. I can write Elvish better. That is some, but Father Christmas says I write even that too spidery, and you will never read it. Love, Ilbereth. And then now you can actually see Tengwar. Oh, I'll try to get there. Oh, you see it? It's Tengwar. So that looks just like the Elvish writing that you see later appear in Middle-earth. Okay, I have 4 more pages here, and then we'll be done. So this is neat. So this is a letter that he writes in, this one is 1938, and this one, he actually includes poems. So he decides to write poems, and Ilbereth, I will read his poem at the end here. Christmas Day, new Christmas Day has come round again, and your North Polar Bear has, and poor North Polar Bear has got a bad pain. They say he swallowed a couple of pounds of nuts without cracking the shells. It sounds a polarish sort of thing to do. But that isn't all. Between me and you, he's eaten a ton of various goods and recklessly mixed all his favorite foods, honey with ham and turkey with treacle and pickles with milk. I think that a week it'll be needed to put the old bear on his feet. And I mustn't forget his particular treat, plum pudding with sausages and Turkish delight, covered with cream and devoured at a bite. And after this dish he stood on his head. It's rather a wonder the poor fellow's not dead. And then there's like a little bit of a fight. So then Polar Bear comes in, absolute rot. I have not got a pain in my pot. And then the elf says, rude fellow. I do not eat turkey or meat. I stick to the sweet, which is why, as all I know, I am so sweet myself, you Phineas elf. Goodbye. And then the elf says, he means fatuous. No, I don't. You're not fat, but thin and silly. And then Father Christmas comes in. You know my friends too well to think, although they're rather rude with ink, that there are really quarrels here. We've had a really jolly year, except for Polar Bear's rusty nail. But now this rhyme must catch the mail. A special messenger must go, in spite of thickly falling snow, or else this won't get down to you on Christmas Day. It's 2:30. We've got a ton of crackers still to pull, and glasses still to fill. Our love to you on this Noel, and till the next one, fare you well. Father Christmas, Polar Bear, Ilbereth, Paxu, and Valatuka. And then this one is, oh, this is interesting here. This is in 1941. And this is when he is age 49. My dearest Priscilla, I am so glad you did not forget to write to me again this year, because now his daughter is old enough to get the letters. And he had a daughter and he had sons as well. The number of children who keep up with me seems to be getting smaller. I expect it is because of this horrible war, and that, when it is over, things will improve again, and I shall be as busy as ever. But at present, so terribly many people have lost their homes or have left them. Half the world seems in the wrong place. So now we see, this is him writing during World War II, Nazi Germany and all of that. So he was always very concerned about that, and he compared Hitler to Melkor, to Sauron, quite a lot in his writings. If you really get to know Tolkien, he was unapologetic in his way of basically talking about the Nazi Party and about Hitler, and he was very brave and courageous to do that. But here he's writing, so I guess it's during the time of war, 1941. And even up here, we have been having troubles. I don't mean only with my stores. Of course, they are getting low. They were already last year, and I have not been able to fill them up, so that I have now to send what I can instead of what is asked for, but worse than that has happened. I expect you remember that some years ago we had trouble with the goblins, and we thought we had settled it. Well, it broke out again this autumn. Worse than it had been for centuries. We have had several battles, and for a while my house was besieged. In November, it began to look likely that it would be captured and all my goods, and that Christmas stockings would all remain empty all over the world. Would not that have been a calamity? It has not happened, and that is largely due to the efforts of Polar Bear. But it was not until the beginning of this month that I was able to send out any messengers. I expect the goblins thought that with so much war going on, this was a fine chance to recapture the north. They must have been preparing for some years, and they made a huge new tunnel which had an outlet many miles away. It was early in October that they suddenly came out in thousands. Polar Bear says there were at least 1 million, but that is his favorite big number. Anyway, he was still fast asleep at that time, and I was rather drowsy myself, and the weather was rather warm for the time of the year, and Christmas seemed far away. There were only 1 or 2 elves about the place, and of course Paxu and Valatuka also fast asleep. The penguins had all gone away in the spring. Luckily, goblins cannot help yelling and beating on the drums when they mean to fight, so we all woke up in time and got the gates and doors barred and the windows shuttered. Polar Bear got on the roof and fired rockets into the goblins' house, and they poured up the long reindeer drive, but that did not stop them for long. We were soon surrounded. I have not time to tell you the whole story. I had to blow 3 blasts on the great horn, wind beam. It hangs over the fireplace in the hall, and if I had not told you about it before, it is because I have not had to blow it for over 400 years. Its sound carries as far as the north wind blows. All the same, it was 3 whole days before help came. Snow boys, polar bears, and hundreds of elves. They came up behind the goblins, and Polar Bear, really awake this time, rushed out with a blazing branch of the fire in each paw. He must have killed dozens of goblins. He says 1 million. But there was a big battle down in the plain near the North Pole in November, in which the goblins brought hundreds of new companies out of their tunnels. We were driven back to the cliff, and it was not until Polar Bear and a party of his younger relatives crept out by night and blew up the entrance to the new tunnels with nearly 100 pounds of gunpowder that we got the better of them for the present. And then, yes, but bang went all the stuff for making fireworks and crackers, the cracking part for some years. The North Pole cracked and fell over for the second time, and we have not yet had time to mend it. Polar Bear is rather a hero. I hope he does not think so himself. I do. But of course, he is a very magical animal, really. And goblins can't do much to him when he is awake and angry. I have seen their arrows bouncing off him and breaking. Well, that will give you some ideas of events, and you will understand why I had not had time to draw a picture this year. Rather a pity, because there have been such exciting things to draw, and why I have not been able to collect the usual things for you, or even the very few that you asked for. I am told that nearly all the Alison Utley books have been burnt, and I could not find one of moldy warp. I must try and get one for next time. I am sending you a few other books, which I hope you will like. There is not a great deal else, but I send you very much love. I like to hear about your bear Bingo, but I really think he is too old and important to hang up stockings. But Polar Bear seems to feel that any kind of bear is a relation, and he said to me, "Leave it to me, old man," that I am afraid is what he often calls me. I will pack a perfectly beautiful selection for his Poliness. So I shall try and bring the beautiful selection along. What is it? I don't know. Very much love from your old friend, Father Christmas and Polar Bear. And then this is important here. So at that point, you start to see the huge battles of Middle-earth and how it connects to also the battles of World War II. And, there's just, and of course he was fighting World War I. So now we see that connection. And I guess he was having a hard time that year because he's like, I wasn't able to find all the presents that you wanted. So when you read this book, you get a really deep understanding of the family and what Tolkien was going through at the time. I'm not reading all the letters, even though I know this is taking a while, but there's a lot more letters that I did not read. I really only picked out the parts that I thought were particularly connecting to Middle Earth and, what was important, I guess. So this is a part that I will read. In 1942, there were no more battles with the goblins. So this is interesting here. And he's writing only to Priscilla because the boys are too old now to get these letters. So it's only Priscilla that's included in the last years. So he says, he goes through and then he says, well, my dear, here is very much love from Father Christmas once more, and very good wishes for 1943. No battles at all this year. Quiet as quiet. I think the goblins were really crushed this time. Windbeam is hanging over the mantelpiece and is quite dusty again, I am glad to say, but Polar Bear has spent lots of time this year making fresh gunpowder, just in case of trouble. He said, wouldn't that grubby little Billy like being here? I don't know what he was talking about, unless it was about your bear. Does he eat gunpowder? You'll find out about the pantry. Ha ha ha. I know what you like. Don't let that little Billy Bear eat it all. Love from Polar Bear. And then this is really the last letter I am reading you. This is the last one in the book. Last letter, 1943. So this is when the letters stop. My dear Priscilla, a very happy Christmas. I suppose you will be hanging up your stockings just once more. I hope so, for I have still a few little things for you. After this, I shall have to say goodbye, more or less. I mean, I shall not forget you. We always keep the old numbers of our old friends and their letters, and later on we hope to come back when they are grown up and have houses of their own and children. My messengers tell me that people call it grim this year. I think they mean miserable, and so it is, I fear, in very many places where I was specially fond of going. But I am very glad to hear that you are still not really miserable. Don't be. I am still very much alive, and shall come back again soon, as merry as ever. There has been no damage in my country, and though my stocks are running low, I hope soon to put that right. Polar Bear, too tired to write himself, so he says, I am really tired. He sends a special message to you, love and a hug. He says, do ask if she still has a bear called Silly Bear, or something like that. Or is he worn out? Give my love to the others, John and Michael and Christopher, and of course to all your pets that you used to tell me about. Polar Bear and all the cubs are very well. They have really been very good this year and have hardly had time to get into any mischief. I hope you will find most of the things that you wanted, and I am very sorry that I have no cat's tongues left, but I have sent nearly all the books you asked for. I hope your stocking will seem full. Very much love from your old friend, Father Christmas. And then I'll show you the last painting. Tolkien really loved the stars, loved space, and really enjoyed the stars. So a lot of his paintings have stars in them. And that, I think, is really it. So that's the tale of Tolkien's Christmas. And I just thought it was a wonderful book to have. Definitely check it out. I think it's really great for any Tolkien collector to own and to have it on their bookshelf. And this is exactly what the elves would do. They would sit around and tell tales and sing and feast and be merry and have food together. And of course, draw the Yule log together, the Yule log. So I hope you all enjoyed that, and I wish you all a wonderful holiday. I wish you all the very best coming to the next year together. And I thought that this was a great way of starting off the Elven Light University, which is all about how to learn the ways of the Tolkien Elves even more and in depth, and to inspire yourself to find the Elven light inside of you, to find the Elven spirit inside of you. And that is what I hope to bring forward on my channel next year. So I have lots of new things heading your way, lots of new projects and things that I will create. And I wish for all of you to have a wonderful holiday with your friends and family, and even just by yourself, just to enjoy a time of self-reflecting and looking back on all that you have accomplished and have achieved this year. Give yourself a pat on the back. You're still here. You're still learning and growing, and you've made it through this year. And all that you have gone through, all the pain and the suffering and maybe the not so great moments, now it is wisdom inside of you. And that's how I have learned to see all of the events that we go through in life. It only makes you gain more wisdom. So, Namarie and Valima Turuhalmë. Thank you for joining in.